From recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex, I'm your host, Steve Urban, and here is your Riderflex Podcast episode of the day. Christine Tai Wei on the Riderflex Podcast today. Good morning, Christine. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Steve?
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Nice meeting you as well. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into Therapeasy, which I love the name, by the way. Cool name. Before we get into it, tell us about you personally. Give us the, the personal overview for Christine, family, where she grew up, college, stuff like that.
Awesome. So I am actually a Colorado native, born and raised in Colorado. Went to high school here, college at CU Boulder. My family actually immigrated here from Vietnam, although they're Chinese by heritage. And they came during the Vietnam War. They were refugees in the war and actually landed here in Colorado. Just a quick little backstory. Grandpa, who I admire a lot, still here in Colorado, Grandpa and Grandma, but Grandpa, second grade education, had moved from China to Vietnam, built an entire empire, or I should say an entire business around supply chain management and tool refurbishment, and then lost everything in the war.
Oh man.
And so he was an orphan at a really young age, and basically moved from Vietnam to China in his teens. It's a really inspiring story. He basically kind of inched towards entrepreneurship over time. So I like to think of, entrepreneurship as being something in my family. Lost everything in the war, moved to Colorado during the war with my parents, or my mom at the time, and the rest of the family. And, started working in the back of, in kitchens of restaurants.
Wow.
And over the course of 30 years in Colorado, he basically ended up being the owner of 2 restaurants. So kind of built his way back and retired. And so lots of entrepreneurship in my family. I actually studied finance and physiology at CU Boulder. Really thought I was going into pre-med, but would faint at the sight or thought of blood. So quickly realized, although I had such a passion for healthcare and for science, it probably wasn't the best fit. So picked up the finance degree and started off my career in finance, actually, working at Goldman Sachs. And did that for a couple of years, but really still always had that itch to get into healthcare. And so over time, I actually got into consulting, did a little bit of IT consulting work, and found a niche of consulting within Kaiser Permanente, which finally positioned me in the healthcare world, but from a business standpoint.
Okay, very good. By the way, can I go back just for a second? What'd your folks do? So I got the grandpa story. What'd your mom and dad do? Did they work in the family business in the restaurants?
So mom actually works a long time career with insurance, doing call center work. She learned English when she moved to Colorado, and then landed a call center job and has just kind of been working in that world for a while. My dad owns a restaurant as well. So after grandpa retired, this next generation of uncles, aunts, and my dad, they own a couple of restaurants in Colorado as well.
Your grandpa's still alive and still lives in Colorado?
Yep.
Man, I bet he would be. I would love to sit down with him. And I bet he's just fascinating to talk to.
He is fascinating. He doesn't speak English, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. But still.
Yes, he is amazing, Steve. I very rarely have the opportunity to, kind of talk backwards to where I come from, my family history, but grandpa has a really special place in my heart. And at some point I want to sit down and write down his story, because it's just so remarkable how many times he's just kind of gotten back up. When you talk to him about it, he's just incredibly humble. He's like, this is the story of everybody in my generation. Why would you write a story about it? It's not special. And I
Yeah, it
can't
is
believe
too.
it.
Is he mid 80s?
He's mid-80s, yes.
Isn't it? It's interesting. Anybody in their mid 80s to early 90s, like those are really special people. They just they've been through so much.
Right.
I mean, when you really look at everything they've been through, I just have so much respect for anybody in that era, right? And you talk to them, and then you meet a 20-year-old today that like complains about stuff, and you you're thinking, like, please,
Right,
why don't you go talk to Christine's dad and then tell me you got it rough,
right.
right?
I
Okay,
mean,
very,
even during the pandemic, recently, last
yeah,
year, he's been at home the whole time, with my
yeah.
grandmother, but their resilience is just so different. They're like, it's okay. Like, this is what we have to do right now. And no complaints.
I where I live, I had a lady that lived next door to us, and she was 92 years old, and so she came up through the depression and all that stuff, right?
Hmm.
And one time, my wife had thrown some curtains out, some old curtains, and we had put them out in the alley to be picked up. And she found those curtains back there, and she brought them around to the front of the house. She's knocking on the front of the door, and I open the door, and she's standing there, little 92-year-old, 90-pound lady, and she's holding these curtains, and she said, somebody threw these curtains away. Can you believe, why would somebody throw these away? I found them out back. Do you know who threw these away? And that really had an effect on me. I thought to myself, that is the mindset of that generation, right? Like this
Totally.
completely different mindset. And I said, Vera, I said, you're right. I don't know why somebody threw those away. Anyway, okay, very special. I appreciate you sharing that story with me about your grandfather. Okay, so back to your career timeline. Now, where did the health interest, where did that come from? What sparked you kind of? I know you got into finance and you were an analyst and everything, but you always kind of had the health interest in the back. Where'd that come from?
Um, Actually, probably kind of stems back from my grandparents because, as I mentioned, they don't speak English. And
Okay.
so growing up,
Okay.
I was always part caretaker, helping them go to the doctor's office. And so
Okay.
I think, just really from a young age in high school, middle school, I started to develop this interest in science and in healthcare, helping people. I also feel like whenever somebody is dealing with a health issue, I feel like it's kind of their most vulnerable,
Hmm.
state. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I just really am inspired by the people who are there to support them during that difficult time. And I've been blessed to receive really great support from nurses when I was going through surgeries and difficult times as well. And I just think that like the level of compassion that you feel from a healthcare worker during that time just can make or break your experience.
Mm.
It's just as like a pat on the shoulder or just, saying something positive or cheering you on. It like means so much. And so I think I've just always had an affinity for that work.
Okay.
But just funny story, in college, I actually picked physiology as my major. So I got all the way to anatomy lab and just could not do it. I finished it. It took me 3 tries, but I finished the anatomy lab. But
Uh,
I think the fear is beyond me in terms of just like blood and other things. I
yeah.
I get I get faint.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it now. Yeah. Okay, and then at some point while you're at Kaiser, talk to
Yes.
me how you start to ease into the entrepreneurial journey of Therapy. Walk us through a little bit of the early stage and some of the transition. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I worked at Kaiser Permanente, and I actually still work at Kaiser Permanente.
Yeah,
So
I saw that. I saw that.
I'm doing a two job kind of
Mm,
life, living a two
right.
job life right now. But at Kaiser, I met a physician named Dr. Katie Richardson, who's one of my co-founders for Therapy.
Ah,
At the time, I was exploring entrepreneurship because I was pursuing an MBA in entrepreneurship and bioinnovation.
okay.
Had an affinity for innovation and startup. Didn't quite have the idea just yet, but knew that eventually maybe I might pivot from a large organization to a smaller startup type of organization, a younger organization, just because I really enjoy that energy and the innovation behind new ideas. And so, and also like I personally love the execution piece of bringing something to life. And
Okay.
so even within like Kaiser and my other jobs previously, that was really always my sweet spot, was getting a project that was pretty ambiguous and bringing it to life. So anyhow, met Dr. Katie Richardson. We kind of started talking about entrepreneurship. She was a physician, pediatrician, also very, very entrepreneurial, but had not really made the leap into something yet. She was
Okay.
still seeing patients. But really what stemmed the idea behind Therapy was my personal experience going through the mental health, kind of system and finding a therapist.
Okay.
So actually about 8 years ago, I went through an unexpected, pretty traumatic surgery, just totally unexpected, was feeling fine one day, didn't feel so well the next day, went into the hospital and realized I needed to be admitted for surgery.
Wow.
So threw me for a loop. I was in my
Right.
early 20s, like, oh my gosh, I thought I was invincible. The surgery actually took, unfortunately, like 6 weeks to really recover from. And so
Oof.
it was pretty intense.
Mm.
And because of that, I think also just the unexpected nature of it, I started to develop like anxiety
Mhm.
around
Mhm.
health. Like, hey,
Yep.
how do I really know if I am okay?
Right. Yep.
And little anxieties about this and that. And after my recovery was when I realized I should probably talk to somebody, because I was very hypersensitive to just every little thing I was feeling on my
Yep.
body. Could it be
Right.
something
Right.
wrong?
Right. Yep. Yeah. Every time you woke up with a new pain, you're like, oh my God, it's something else. Yep. Totally get it.
Yep. Are my grandparents okay? Are my parents okay? Is everything okay? Like just this
Mhm.
anxiety that was really stemmed from that experience. So started to look for a therapist. Had never seen a therapist before, but realized in that moment I needed to talk to somebody.
Yep.
This is not my normal kind of response. And so at the time went through my insurance network, found a long list of therapists. You really just have to kind of trial and error and call people to see who's taking
Right.
new patients.
Right.
Got connected with somebody, realized it wasn't a good fit maybe after the second or third session. And she was bringing up more of the trauma, but not really helping me resolve it either.
Okay. Okay.
And maybe I was too quick to respond, but I didn't feel a strong connection to her, basically.
Gotcha. Yep.
So I, found a way to say, hey, I think I'm all better. I think I'm gonna go, I think I'm all better now. I don't think we need to schedule another appointment, because each session you're essentially paying out of pocket, a co-payment or something. So it was
Yep.
costly as well.
Right.
So I just kept doing this on and off. I would go years without seeing anybody, and then something really
Yep.
traumatic would happen in my
Right.
life again and trigger me. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm having a panic attack. I need to talk to somebody. So went through, online directories, went through my EAP, every avenue I've probably explored. So over the last 5 years, I've had like 8 different therapists. And
Okay.
each time I kind of call myself like a therapy dropout. every every time it doesn't go well, and I'm like, oh, we really don't have a connection, or I don't feel like I'm getting the support I need, I would stop and kind of deem myself as I'm fine for now until something else triggered me.
Mm.
So the positive side of the story is, the last few years I've been actually working with the same therapist. So found
Okay.
her, 3 or 4 years ago. Great fit, like talking to a close friend. So
Yeah.
we've been meeting, really consistently. And I, definitely firsthand have seen the impact that it has on my anxiety, just in terms of the balance that I normally have when nothing is triggering me is
Mhm.
totally different. So because of that experience, I'm like, hey, I wonder, back to Dr. Katie Richardson, I was talking with her and just casually talked about my mental health experience. And I said, I just think that maybe in mental health, more than in other service areas and healthcare, that connection, that spark probably means something. Like it probably has,
Yep.
yeah, it probably impacts the outcomes that you might have. And she was like, totally shared her
Mhm.
personal story with finding the perfect therapist. And that's honestly, Steve, like how it kind of sparked was like,
Okay.
whoa, to
Yep.
me, like I'm like a pediatrician had the same experience. She sees this idea as viable. I reached out to, one of my friends who's really into entrepreneurship, John Just, who's the third co-founder of
Okay.
Therapeasy.
Okay.
And he jumped on board and the three of us just started to research this idea 3 years ago. And basically we did consumer surveys, focus groups, looked at clinical studies to see, are we onto something? Like, is there really such a thing as like a strong provider and patient fit?
Mhm.
Or, are we making this up and it's not a real problem? But all of, the surveys that we did and the focus groups we did with therapists also confirmed there is such a thing. Like, yeah,
Mm.
I have an ideal client, therapists would say, that I tend to have most success with.
Gotcha.
And then patients are like, well, yeah, these are the factors, that matter to me when I'm looking for a therapist. So we designed this eHarmony, we like to say, for
Right.
therapy
Yeah.
called Therapeasy, which is just a quick and easy way to match to your most compatible therapist when you're ready to seek care.
I love the idea. So now let's do this. I want to come back to the health scares that people have that send them into worry and depression. I want to talk a lot more about that. But first, give me the overview of Therapeasy as it stands today. Give us the 3-minute elevator pitch as it is today. Go for it.
All right, as it is today, Therapeasy, like I said, is the eHarmony for therapy. We are only in Colorado right now, but we have over 140 providers on the site. So we just launched last May. We have 140 providers on the site. We've facilitated over 800 matches since last May.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and so basically how it works, if you were looking for therapy, you would go through a quick survey on our site, very easy, kind of get to know who you are, what you're looking for, what your preferences are in a therapist. And it actually shows you, kind of like dating sites, shows you your top 3 compatible matches. So you can go in and click into their profiles and learn more about that therapist. You're actually able to initiate a chat with them on
Okay.
our site, just so you can explore the fit a little bit better before committing to scheduling your first appointment.
Video chat or written chat, or what is that? What does that look like?
Just a messaging system, two-way
Messaging.
messaging system. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Does it cost?
Free for everyone to use to find a provider.
Well, how do you make money? What's the business model?
So it's a subscription model on the therapist side because we are finding quality leads for them. So it's a really affordable rate. We actually all of last year during the pandemic, we made the decision to make it free on both ends. So we're actually still pre-revenue technically right now.
Okay.
We wanted to onboard as many providers as possible during the pandemic, and just be able to help people find a therapist during that time. So we wanted to grow that base as strong as possible. This year, we're launching a new version that has more features and dashboard and reporting for the provider. So really some features that the providers will find helpful as they manage their leads through the system. And so we are turning on the subscription model in February, actually.
Love that idea. So basically what you did was you got your proof of concept, you got some users, you got some traction, you got some reviews, you got everybody on both sides liking it, no cost. and then you make the functionality even better and add some more features and go back to your doctors and you say, hey, look, or your therapist, you go back to them and say, would love to continue to provide you with this awesome tool you have, but it's going to cost a little bit of money now, which if they really love it and it's generated extra clients for them, they're probably going to just be willing to sign on, I guess, right?
Yeah. And we do anticipate, I mean, it breaks my heart a little bit because it's like my baby, but we do anticipate a few therapists
Sure.
probably not continuing the service.
Yep.
And mostly because it's actually mental health professionals. We're in such a shortage. And so most therapists that I talk to day, their panels are completely full. Like they don't have the capacity to take on new clients.
Okay.
So they may remove the profile once we start charging.
Okay. But still you'll gain some clients out of it. So pre-revenue. So you guys bootstrapped this thing. The three of you. Now that's you were all able to do that because you all have other jobs, right? So that's how you did this on nights and weekends, etc.
Yeah, lots of nights and weekends. And also John Just, actually, one of my co-founders, he quit his job last February, his full-time job, and he took the dive in full-time. Poor guy, unexpectedly, the pandemic happened. And so we were really expecting to at least be working in the same room. And so he ended up being at home a lot more than he wanted, which I think he would say is a drawback, but I think it also was very helpful for him to be so hands-on operationally as things were getting launched. And so, we're all juggling some side things. Dr. Richardson has several contract positions on the side. But yes, bootstrap till this point, but we'll definitely need help as we think about expanding.
Was the bootstrap from a finance perspective, did you guys all three put in money to pay some software engineers or some developers to get the website up and some coding done, or what'd you do?
Yeah. So the bootstrapping so far is primarily development and advertising.
Okay.
Advertising is so expensive. So that is a learning from 2020 as we launched, was attracting traffic although it's a free service, attracting traffic from patients who are seeking care is actually pretty costly from an advertising perspective. And then the bulk of the bootstrapping has been the development of the tool.
Yeah. Is it an app or just a website, or what's the deal?
It's a website. It's mobile capable. It's not an app right now. Just right now, the functionality is just the match. But as we kind of expand functionality to after you match, can we provide you with some tools and some ongoing things that would help you in your therapy? Then maybe we'll explore making it an app.
Okay. And you haven't taken on any cash. Are you going to wait till you get some revenue going before you try to raise some capital, or what's the plan?
We're open to both. This year we are, like I said, flipping to the subscription model. So hoping some revenue will start rolling in, and that'll help with ongoing development and advertising. Definitely not looking to pay ourselves yet for a while until this thing actually kind of gets some momentum. But at the same time, we're also exploring, grants or any other modes of capital funding. We're a little bit, new to this as well, all three of us. From the capital front, I think we're still kind of learning as we go.
Do you have a pitch deck for angels already? Have you been on any angel meetings where you're asking wealthy people to write you a check? Have you done any of that yet?
I have not had the privilege to meet with angel investors, but I do have a pitch deck. I did Denver Startup Week this year, and we were one of the finalists in the pitch competition.
Cool. All right. Very good.
That was really fun. We pitched 2 nights. We made it to the finals. We didn't win, unfortunately, but there was prize money, and that would have helped. But it was a great experience. I would definitely be open to pitching more.
Great experience for you. How did you decide between the three that you were going to be the CEO, and how did that come about? What are the other two? What is their functionality in the business?
Yeah. So because we have had like 3 years working on the project before it was actually being developed and the tool was launched, we've had some familiarity with everybody's strengths. And so we had talked about it. I've always been really like the storyteller, the spokesperson, really kind of driving sales as well. And so in some ways there, like it kind of, the fit was there to, I guess, be the spokesperson, the CEO. And also, I think I just have a very ambitious vision for what this thing could be, which helps to kind of drive the motivation and the inspiration for it. Dr. Katie Richardson, she's an awesome pediatrician, but also just like a huge advocate of entrepreneurs in Colorado. So if you know an entrepreneur in healthcare, they've probably heard of Dr. Richardson because she's given advice at some point. So she actually is our head of provider experience. So she's been really working with the therapists to understand what their experience has been. That's where we've been pulling feedback to know what are the new features that would be suitable and desirable to the providers to roll out in this next phase. She's been kind of nurturing our providers, and she also is, just because of how well networked she is, she's been connecting us with provider networks, all things providers, really getting us in front of networks and potential partners. And then John, data whiz, he calls himself a self-proclaimed data nerd, he says. But now that I've worked with him a lot more closely, he's definitely very, very talented at data analysis, can do all kinds of things with data and really derive the meaning of what it's like trying to tell us, right? How should we make the decisions from what we're seeing? So he's been kind of head of product, head of kind of keeping task of our development and what's coming live, what do we need to prioritize, what do we need to scale back on, helping us kind of work with the developers, but also really like, everything from like developing our user database to looking at our finances. He has a really rich healthcare finance background. He's worked in hospitals for like the last 10, 15 years. So he's like finance, data, product. He's like the heart of the operations.
Okay, very good. What do you guys do when you disagree? What do you like, take a vote because there's 3 of you, or what? How does that work?
We work really well together. We rarely disagree, but yes, it does help that we're 3 because it's very sometimes 2 of us can persuade the other one.
Right.
And so that's, it makes it easier.
Any competition? Do you worry about that? What does the landscape look like there?
Yeah, so there are competitors out there. There's actually, over the last year, Steve, we've seen so many new like matching type of organizations pop up. So also startups as well. But I think that everybody is emphasizing or focusing on something a little bit different. Like we came across one that emphasizes on getting millennials therapy. And so they're recruiting therapists that have a specialty or, have a specialty in working with millennials for people of that generation. So that's their emphasis. We came across another one that very neat, they are all about connecting people of color to therapists of color who are basically looking for a therapist of the same background or identity for relatability, but then that's their niche, and so I think for us, like we're more about like, where do you start? Like, regardless of who you are, where can you start if you are looking for therapy? And regardless of whether you have insurance or not, and all these other parameters, your availability, your location, your communication style, what you're dealing with, can we be like a starting place to help you at least get, your top compatible providers, and you have a place to start and reach out to somebody.
Okay.
So
Very good.
I think there's still enough like differentiation there. Even though there are a lot of players in this space, there's some really established players in Colorado, for example, where they're networks. So a provider actually signs on to be a part of their network, and then they match them to clients. But what that means from a provider standpoint is you give up a little bit of your compensation because you're now a part of their network, and they collect payment before they pay the provider. And so we really kind of think of ourselves as like a no strings attached type of model. We're like subscription based, month to month. And so if at any given point the provider's like, hey, like I don't have capacity anymore, they can just unsubscribe.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
What happens when your boss at Kaiser like starts worrying that you're like, well, what's Christine working on this week? She's spending too much time on Therapy. She's do you worry about that? Well, talk to me.
Yeah, I actually disclosed to my bosses at Kaiser last year. I was about to launch this, and I'm like, hey, it's moving from kind of a passion project to there's going to be exposure. I'm going to be posting on LinkedIn about this.
Right.
I'm going to be talking about this. And even if it's like, at odd hours of the day or whatever, I'm going to be at least advocating about this. So I disclosed to them, they're aware of it. They don't see a conflict of interest right now. They're like, unless you like are selling to Kaiser at some point, then there would be a direct conflict of interest. But right now, as long as, I'm kind of staying on top of my work, which I am, there's not really kind of a conflict until they see otherwise, of course, Steve. Like definitely, like sometimes I'm working at like all times of the day, at some point, I hope that I'm not dropping a ball for either, right? But it's really helpful that right now we there's 3 of us. And so if I can't make it to something because I'm working, like somebody else can take it. And so it's nice that there's 3 founders of Therapy that can kind of divide and conquer.
Okay, very good. Real quick, I want to talk about your experience with, finding a therapist yourself and going through some of the things you went through, which I really appreciate you sharing, but it's brave of you to share your own struggles.
Thank you. It took a long time.
So many people are scared to share that, I myself, I don't know. I think it's more common for people over 50. Every time you wake up with a new pain somewhere, your mind starts drifting to, big stuff, right? It's cancer, it's this, it's that. It's, because as you get older, people that have had stuff happen to them. And so then every time you have a new pain, you're starting to drift a little bit mentally around that, or at least I have. I know it's definitely affected me the last 3 years a lot more. I mean, I never, when I was in my 30s and 40s, if I had a new pain or whatever, I never even thought that about, quote, bigger things could be wrong with me. I mean, it never even crossed my mind. Right. Now that I'm in my mid 50s, every time I got a new pain, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this what is this? which leads to, anxiety and some other things that you talked about. So I appreciate you sharing your story. And I think more people have this happening to them than they want to admit, and probably even more of them need therapy. And I also think men in general stay away from admitting this because, they got the whole John Wayne thing going on in their heads, like I'm too tough for that, or whatever. And so I think my point is, I think it's a great tool. And I think more people need to realize that they probably do need help. I also think you're right. As I think about the different doctors I go to, whether I'm going to my back doctor or my regular doctor or my allergy doctor, as I'm going to these different doctors, some of them I kind of care if I have a personal relationship with, and some of them I don't, right? It kind of depends. It depends. Boy, if I was seeing a therapist, I would want to be emotionally connected to that person. I would need to feel a good emotional connection to them. They couldn't just be a transactional doctor for me.
Right.
And so that's why I think the tool you've built is super valuable. I could see that your eHarmony, right?
Yeah. Thank
Very,
you.
very similar to what Riderflex does as a recruiting firm. We're all about trying to match candidate personalities to company culture, which is similar to what you're trying to do. You're trying to match something that it's like, hey, do I enjoy this person's company? Do I feel safe and comfortable around them? Beyond their professional skill set. Very good. 800 matches so far. Wow. I
Yes.
like that. I like that. Very good.
It's
Let me look here. Therapeasy. Yeah. Therapeasy.co. Is that correct?
yes, that's correct.
Therapeasy.co is where you can go if you're listening to this podcast. Also, Christine Tai Wei is also on LinkedIn. If you want to go to LinkedIn and connect with her there, right? Is that okay for the listeners as well?
Definitely.
Okay. Anything else that you want to tell them regarding connecting or using the product? Anything else there on a summary for the listeners?
Just reiterate that it's free to use. You also, don't have to commit. You can definitely just explore the profiles once you receive the connection, the compatible providers. And like I said, initiate a message with them. A lot of providers actually offer free, like 15-minute consultations over the phone too. And so they may offer that. And just thinking if it's the first time that you're seeking therapy, may be daunting, and you may still be deciding whether it's a good fit or not for what you're dealing with, there's definitely ways to ease into it. And so don't feel like, if you're logging onto therapeasy.co and you're searching for a therapist, you're committing to sessions every month or something like that. There's ways to ease into it, to explore the fit, to explore if you're a good candidate for therapy before you're actually, even at your first appointment.
Okay. Any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs listening to this podcast that have an idea, but they haven't started yet? Anything you want to tell them real quick?
I would say find some, if you are energized by other people, find some rock star partners because I definitely am energized by other people. And so it really gave the idea legs for me once I realized my partners were all in too, and they love the idea. And, we kind of energize one another in the whole process, especially, with entrepreneurship. I think this is what I'm learning now, is it's going to take a while. Like it's not kind of an overnight,
Right.
success story. So in some of the harder times, it's really helpful to have, whether it's partners in the business or just a really great support circle around you, because I think you got to ride those waves to be able to reach that success story, which, I don't know if we're there yet, but we're hoping to move in that direction.
Very good advice. Yeah. For the listeners, please don't think, oh, you're going to have this idea and then you're going to meet a co-founder and then you're going to roll out a product a month later. And then like some firm in California is going to write you a $5 million check. Like that. The reality is that's not going to happen. Okay. Yeah, I know every once in a while there's some ideas that get funded and all of a sudden you have giant cash in the bank, but really that's just not reality for most people. It is going to take a while. So you better surround yourself with co-founders that you enjoy, because there's going to be some long nights and long days, and it's going to take a while to get it going. So surround yourself with people you like and that complement your skill set.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what Riderflex is all about, right, Steve?
That is correct. Yep. Yep.
I love what you guys do, because I do think part of why Therapeasy has gone so well so far is the three of us have a very strong, personality fit, cultural fit.
Exactly. Yes.
We have similar backgrounds in terms of our career path. And so we understand each other really well. So yes.
Yeah, it matters. It really matters. Just remember, you're going to be hanging out with your co-founders a lot. So, if you don't just get along personally, if you can't I don't know, if you don't like telling the same jokes, if you don't have the same sense of humor, whatever, like all this stuff, it really does matter at the end of the day. It does, because you're just going to be, imagine traveling across the country in an automobile for 36 hours with somebody. Like you want to like ride with somebody you kind of enjoy being around, don't you?
Right. Right.
Um, Last question for you. If you had to define your core purpose in life
Mm,
right now, if you had to put that into a sentence, what does that sound like for you?
boy. Right now, in this moment, I think I consider myself a mental health advocate.
Okay.
And so, whether that's my work with Therapy or just one off conversations with friends, I'm constantly encouraging people to check in on their mental health. I think that there's so much, you mentioned it, Steve, there's so much stigma around mental health, especially for certain demographics, men, Asian Americans. It's not an easy topic to talk about.
Right.
But I think, especially given everything that's been happening the last year, just all the different things that may be triggering or traumatic for people, whether that looks like talking to a therapist or not, or if it's just really talking to somebody you trust and opening up about the things that you are struggling with. I think checking in on our mental health is really important. So I feel like my core purpose right now is being that soundbite, being that advocate about taking care of our mental health. I think, I'd never, asked me 10 years ago, it probably would not have anything to do with mental health, but a lot of it is because of my personal journey in this area. And it's like you said, it's allowed me to open up more and more about my journey and what, the mental health kind of struggles that I've dealt with. But I realize every time I talk about it or share a story, whoa, there's another story. Like somebody else is also experiencing something similar, or kind of in, like something similar, or in that space. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I was just going to say, one thing I recently am like thinking more and more about is like our physical health. Even if we're feeling just fine, we probably have a physical checkup at least once a year or once every few years. Our teeth, like even if everything feels fine, I have one or two cleanings and checkups per year. Even something like our cars, like even if as everything is running fine, we bring it in for an oil change and get everything checked out. But
Right.
like we rarely have that check up or check in with our mental health.
Wow. Great point. I never thought about it that way. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
And
Very good.
it's like so critical to what we do, right? Our mental health, our well-being, it's like our vitality, and it's very rare that we check in on it.
Mm,
So thank you for
good
asking
point.
that question.
Yeah. Great point. Congratulations, Christine, on everything you guys have built so far. I wish you the best of luck as things move along.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being on the Riderflex podcast. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviewing. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get information and pricing on the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.